A wise man once said, "You can't see the forest for the trees." And this is exactly what happens when they teach you to analyze music as a series of individual chords. You learn the words, but you can't speak the language. In this series, I'll show you the 3 essential harmonic progressions you need to know to actually understand harmony in classical music, plus a bonus formal function that I'll reveal in the end. After each video, we'll put this knowledge into practice analyzing 2 of the most famous pieces ever written, and hopefully you'll see how your harmonic analysis skills upgrade in real time. Let's begin! We call harmonic progressions to certain successions of chords that happen within a musical piece. Harmonic progressions are one of the most important tools a composer has when it comes to managing the musical energy. There are different types, and each of them fulfills one specific role within the musical speech. The prolongational function represents stability, embellishing a tonal center in a kind of circular motion. Sequences, on the other hand, represent the forward motion, often moving away from the initial key. And finally, cadential progressions represent the closing function, akin to punctuation marks in the speech. The more music you listen to, the more you realize how these 3 types of progressions can form the basis of the tonal music syntax. In this video, we'll focus on the first type, the prolongational progressions. Prolongational progressions are used to embellish a given harmony. Before exploring how they are built, we need to understand first their underlying harmonic principle, which is the concept of static or sustained harmony. As the name suggests, sustained harmony happens when a musical fragment is built only on one type of chord. However, this is not how sustained harmony usually looks like. Composers use a wide variety of techniques to make static harmonic passages more appealing to the ear. One of them is the use of melodic arpeggios, in which the notes of the chord are displayed melodically. In the following example, the arpeggio takes the form of a melodic sequence, but the harmony doesn't change. Arpeggios can also appear in unison. In these cases, we don't have an explicit vertical chord, but nevertheless, the result is understood as one single harmony in root position. Arpeggios may display additional notes in between. These are known as non-chord tones because they don't belong to the expressed harmony, but they enrich it and add melodic interest. In the following example, we can appreciate how the composer used this resource extensively. Prolongational progressions are closely related to the concept of non-chord tones, except they operate both as melodic and harmonic devices. Let's imagine a case of sustained harmony with the same chord repeated twice and a neighbor tone in between. Now, let's say we transform this neighbor tone into a fully developed chord. The idea is the same, except now we have 3 harmonic events instead of 1. The prolonged harmony, which is the beginning and end of the progression, and the prolongational harmony in between. Hence, a prolongational progression occurs when the listener perceives a sustained harmony, despite the presence of intervening chords in between. Prolongational progressions can be classified according to the function of the prolonged harmony. While, theoretically speaking, any chord could fit this role, in classical music only 2 types of prolonged harmonies are used consistently, the tonic and the dominant prolongations. In this video, I'll focus on prolongational progressions that function as phrase openings, but I'll cover the others in future videos for reasons you'll understand in due time.
Opening tonic prolongations.
Tonic prolongations represent tonal stability, and for that very reason they are mostly used as opening gambits or as post-cadential passages. I distinguish 3 main types of opening tonic prolongations, depending on the number of steps involved: the simple, the extended, and the compound type. Simple tonic prolongations consist of only three harmonic events, the two prolonged tonic chords and the prolongational harmony in between, which usually functions as either subdominant or dominant, like in this example. Depending on the voice leading, we may distinguish two types of simple prolongational chords. First, the neighbor chord. In the neighbor chord, the prolonged harmonies are both in the same inversion, so it feels like the prolongational chord just moves away and back from the starting point. In the standard voice leading for neighbor chords, the bass and the top voices move in contrary motion. When the top voice moves up, the bass goes down, and vice versa. Here is an alternative realization of the very same harmony. In the following example, the prolongational progression is expressed with only two voices, but the idea remains the same. The next one might be a bit more tricky to spot because of the ornamented top line, but ultimately both bass and top line move away and back from the same note. In cases like this, when instead of moving by a step, the bass leaps down a perfect fourth, the resulting progression may look like a cadence, but it's actually not. I'll explain why when I talk about cadential progressions in my future videos. Contrary motion between extreme voices may not always be possible or wanted. Keeping the bass note as a pedal point is also a recurrent choice, especially when the neighbor chord functions as subdominant. This is exactly what happened in the previous example by Buchmüller. The other type of simple prolongational chord is the passing chord. In the passing chord, the prolongational harmony connects different inversions of the same chord. Just like in neighbor chords, in passing chords the bass and top voices usually precede by contrary motion. Here is an alternative realization. The principles of neighbor and passing chords may appear combined. What you see here is known by some authors as the Do-Re-Mi schema, a popular opening gambit in the 18th century music. In the Do-Re-Mi schema, one of the extreme voices behaves as a neighbor tone and the other as a passing note. Here is the inverted variant. Let's talk about extended prolongational progressions. In this kind of progression, we've got at least 4 harmonic events, the prolonged harmony and at least 2 prolongational chords in between. When 2 dominant chords are used as prolongation, like in this example, they are usually presented in different inversions, creating what some may call a double neighbor chord. There are no fixed rules with respect to the top voice behavior. In this concrete example, we've got what some authors call the Sol-Fa-Mi schema because of its particular melodic design. However, other melodic variants with different names can be found as well. In this other example, the dominant harmony stays in the same inversion, but we can still count it as 2 events because of its sequential design. The other common type of extended prolongational progression is the one in which the dominant harmony is preceded by a subdominant chord, either the 2nd or 4th degree, The following example represents an interesting variant in which the final chord is the 6th degree, a common tonic substitute. For some, this may not represent a true tonic prolongation, but it is, nevertheless, used in the very same way, which is why I consider it a deceptive variant of the tonic prolongation. Every prolongational chord might be preceded by its own secondary dominant. In this example, we can see one of the most usual procedures, a tonicization of the subdominant. This may be a potentially confusing case for students, as it may initially look like a modulation to the fourth degree. However, considering the big picture, this is just part of a bigger prolongational process, and the final target of the progression is not the fourth degree, but the tonic, in this case F major. This is why it's always important to analyze progressions as a complete unit and not as a series of individual chords. Notice also how the whole progression is underlined with a tonic pedal in the bass, a procedure that can be potentially used in any of the tonic prolongation types discussed up to this point. Let's talk about compound prolongational progressions. These types of progressions happen when two or more prolongational cycles are chained together. We can see this procedure in the following example: an initial tonic prolongation with a dominant harmony in between, and a second cycle with a subdominant middle harmony. Notice how the middle tonic chord serves as link between cycles, which allows for the second melodic arc to start directly on the prolongational harmony. This is, in fact, the standard procedure in compound prolongational progressions.
Opening dominant prolongations.
In classical music, dominant prolongations appear mostly as post-cadential passages, which is something we'll discuss in future videos. However, there are two places in which dominant prolongations may function as opening gambits: the secondary themes in the sonata form and the beginning of the second part of small binary forms. These types of dominant prolongations were known in the 18th century as the ponte schema, which means bridge in Italian. In the ponte schema, we may have either static dominant harmony or, more commonly, a dominant prolongation with intervening chords, usually the tonic. The rules with regard to length, melodic shape, and chord inversions are extremely flexible here, so we can find many different combinations of the ponte schema. It's also common, but not mandatory, to underline this progression with a dominant pedal in the bass. Another aspect to bear in mind with respect to the ponte schema is that it often appears incomplete as a way to merge into subsequent harmonic progressions. Depending on the context, opening and dominant prolongations may present a certain degree of tonal ambiguity, especially when the dominant chord lacks the seventh. In the following example, we've got a dominant prolongation in the key of B major, which is the secondary key of the sonata. However, without further harmonic context, the first few bars may initially be heard as a tonic prolongation in the key of F sharp major, which only after bar 3 starts behaving as a proper dominant. Let's test what we learned today. The following are the first 4 bars of Bach's famous Prelude in C major. Before I give you my analysis of this passage, pause the video and try to figure out what's going on here by yourself. Alright, so what we've got here is an extended tonic prolongation with 2 intervening chords, subdominant and dominant. Notice how both tonic chords are in the same inversion and position, making this a neighboring type prolongation. The top voice moves from E to F, and back to E, while the bass line moves from C to B and back to C. Notice how the tonic is kept in the base of the subdominant chord, a very common procedure as I explained earlier in this video. In this case, the bass behaves as a dissonant suspension. The C was prepared as a consonant note in the previous chord and is resolved downwards by a stepwise motion in the following one. Let's listen to the first 4 bars from Mozart's Easy Sonata in C major. Again, pause the video and let me know what you see. This passage is what I call a compound tonic prolongation, with 2 main cycles linked through the middle tonic chord, the second of which is also a compound prolongation on its own. The first cycle has a dominant prolongational harmony behaving as a neighbor chord. The bass ascends from C to D and then back to C, while the top line's essential notes move from C to B and back to C. The second cycle takes a hybrid approach. The bass line performs a neighbor motion in the opposite direction, from C to B and back to C, while the top line performs a descending melodic pattern moving in parallel tenths with one of the inner voices. This concrete pattern is known as the pre-inner schema, a very common reposed strategy after the opening gambit in many musical pieces. Notice, once again, how the tonic is kept in the base of the subdominant chord. That's all for today. Let me know if this video was helpful and don't forget to support me on Patreon for more content like this. Thanks for watching and see you next time.